So Ford vs. Ferrari follows a story that a lot of people are aware of and know like the basic details of, but don't really know the actual story of. And from looking it up, this story is actually pretty damn accurate when it comes to the characters and the events that are portrayed in this. So back in the 1960s, Ford Motor Company tried to buy Ferrari when they went bankrupt. When Ferrari said no and lashed some horrible insults at Henry Ford II, who they called the Deuce, Henry Ford decided that he needed to make super-powered cars and beat him in Formula One racing, specifically at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. So on the surface, that's what this movie is about, but what it is truly and actually about is the driver of Ken Miles, who's now in the American Hall of Fame when it comes to drivers. But this follows him from being just a nobody driver to being the driver that wins the 24 hours at Le Mans for the Ford company. But it's about him and Carroll Shelby starting from the ground and building this racing dynasty of Ford up from the ground till when Ford wins the 1, 2, 3 of first, second, and third place at Le Mans. Now, Ken Miles is played by Christian Bale and Carroll Shelby is played by Matt Damon. Christian Bale has done something absolutely amazing, which is he has separated himself from the superhero that he has played, which is something that not a lot of actors can do, specifically the actors in Marvel, but he is easily the biggest superhero in DC playing Batman. But people like Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, Ryan Reynolds, all these people just kind of get stuck in playing the superhero that they portray. Everybody just kind of knows them as that. Robert Downey Jr. is a huge name. For his last appearance, he got paid $50 million in Endgame to play Iron Man, and forever he will be known as Iron Man. Not a bad thing. It's a great thing to be known as. I mean, Daniel Radcliffe will always be Harry Potter, no matter how many weird movies he tries to do. Christian Bale, in my mind, and many other people's mind, is not Batman anymore. Since his last appearance as Batman, he's played Irving Rosenfeld in American Hustle, Michael Burry in The Big Short, which one of my all-time favorite movies, and what an excellent performance. Like, it's unlike anything else I've ever seen from him, and that alone paints a big picture of what he can do. I think that was a big role that he chose to step aside from Batman, and maybe most notably is the change he did physically to play Dick Cheney in Vice. Now, these are just a few movies that he's done since Batman came out, but they're the ones that come to my mind, and it's roles like this that have truly separated him from that, and I love seeing him play characters like this, like anything really. And then going back to see him do Batman is just astonishing that it's the same guy. Matt Damon has also been one of my favorite actors since Good Will Hunting. I loved him in that. Side note, I would love to see him and Ben Affleck do more stuff together. They're such a great combo, and it's really a shame that they don't do things together anymore. But I've heard the comparison, and I've made the comparison myself as well, that he does a lot of characters that are very similar. But that's not always a bad thing. He does that because he's good at it. And they never feel bland. They have differences, but his acting's very similar in all the movies. A lot of people point out the fact that he plays somebody that needs to be saved, and that's just kind of funny. But he's very good in this. And I know I point out chemistry a lot in movies, but that's because the best movies have the best chemistry. Him and Christian Bale have great chemistry where they seem like just bickering brothers. One good thing this movie does is it tells a story that spans over years of time without ever really seeming awkward in its jumps. You don't really think about the fact that, oh, this is spanning many years. This was just a 3-month jump, and it never really tells when it is. You just realize at one point, oh, they're at Le Mans now. It's been 3 months. Or, oh, now it's 6 months later after Le Mans. This movie also got me interested in a sport that I had literally no interest in whatsoever until this came out. Like, I was watching this, and as I was watching it, every now and then, I would look down at my phone and I'd look up stuff to see, oh, okay, this is accurate. What they're portraying here actually did happen. What they're saying actually did happen. Because a lot of movies, I'm looking at Invincible, really exaggerate what actually happens in the movies. Like, Invincible is nothing like the true story. This one's very similar. But while doing that, I got reading about Ken Miles, I got reading about Carroll Shelby, got reading about Le Mans and Formula One, and the Indianapolis 500. I'd actually love to go attend that now after seeing this. And I think that's spectacular that this movie was able to get me interested in something like that until watching this, I knew nothing about. Now I've spent 5-6 hours learning about the sport and learning about these people, and I think that's a feat in and of itself. I'd also like to kind of go on a sidebar right now and talk about Ken's relationship with his family, specifically with his wife in this. It is really wonderful seeing a portrayal of family and marriage like this. Like, his wife is extremely supportive and just wants him to follow his dream, but she also is very upfront about the fact that I want you to follow your dream, but we need money. You need to put food on the table. I'm working double shifts and taking care of our son, Peter, who after doing research, also has gotten into the car industry a lot like his father. But they have a wonderful marriage, and seeing her support of him and her show so much interest in his interests is wonderful. They have a wonderful back and forth, and he has a lot of anger problems, and he snaps at people, and she's always there to calm him down and be like, babe, rein it in, you're being an ass. Another kind of sidebar is the side characters in this. More specifically, the Ford executives. They always call them just the suits in this, and they're kind of the bad guys of this movie, trying to keep them down. They're the reason that actually the first year of Le Mans, Ken Miles can't race, because they think that he's not a good face for Ford because he's just kind of a redneck greaser, you know? And they're the bad guys. And they actually have some really good actors for these bad guys. They have Josh Lucas, who plays the main dickhead. But they also have John Barenthal. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I think it is. He's a fantastic actor, and he had a very small part in this, but I really enjoyed it, and he kind of had a slight redemption at the end, but they just got great actors all around. Now, I've recently watched The Irishman, and just because I like to go back to it, I've also watched The Wolf of Wall Street. Both those movies are like 3.5 hours long. So this movie isn't long in comparison, so that might be why it was easy for me to sit through it. This is a longer movie. It's a little bit over 2.5 hours. One thing I can say, it captivates you. It really brings in your attention. Like, I would just go to the kitchen to get a pop or a juice or whatever, and I'd pause, even though I know he'd be back in 5 seconds, because I didn't want to miss anything. And this movie just blazes by, and at the end of it I was like, oh my god, it's the end. It's 11:30 at night. I had no idea this movie was this long. I thought it was an hour and a half. I didn't know it was almost over. Something that keeps your attention like that for something this long, and something that's very character based, very wordy, that's also very nice. What I said a little bit earlier is that the first year at Le Mans, they didn't allow Ken Miles to race because they said that he was not a good face for Ford. During that scene, you just kind of see him in the shop back home listening to it on the radio. He's calling out all these things that are going to break on the car. He hears the engine rev and he's like, oh, you're pushing it too hard. You're over 7,000 RPMs. This is going to break. He warned him about the gearbox overheating. The gearbox overheated. And after they lost horribly, he was allowed to be the driver at the next year's Le Mans, mainly by a lot of persuading by Carroll Shelby in a really cool scene where he gets Henry Ford II into the car and he just like breaks down like a baby, not realizing what it's like to be in a Formula One car like that. But then he gets to Le Mans at the end of the movie, and the whole Le Mans part is about 45 minutes long of the race, which makes sense because it is a 24-hour period and it's what this whole movie is building to. And the start of it is just exhilarating. Like, they take off and instantly there's like 5 or 6 crashes that Ken Miles has to avoid, and then there's all these issues that goes wrong with the car, but then you just see how amazing of a driver he is. He's pulling off all these maneuvers that nobody would dream of, taking these huge risks. He knows everything about this car. He can feel the exact RPM just by the vibrations on the road, and it really pushes home just how good of a driver he is throughout this entire 45-minute experience of him driving. The racing scenes are just awesome like that. All of them are. Not even the racing scenes, just with him dicking around on a track while learning how to drive the car. And at the very end, he's robbed of his victory, and it makes you angry, and at first it makes Ken Miles upset because what happened was they wanted all 3 Fords that were in first, second, and third place to pass the finish line at the exact same time for like a nice photo op or some shit like that. And they said that the person that was behind him actually won because the car started 20 yards back. And it was obvious that the executives did not like Ken Miles and just wanted to rob him of the first place. But it shows amazing character progression that our introduction to this character was him yelling at people and throwing a wrench at Shelby. And in this, he was okay with it. He said to Shelby, you promised me the ride, not the win. And then they walk off and talk about what they need to fix about the car to make it lighter, and they'll be back next year to take the win. And it just shows really good growth. And then Ken dies in a car crash on the test track, and his son watches him burn to death. And it's incredibly sad, and it gets to you. And I understand it is a true story. It's not like they were just trying to pull at your heartstrings. That actually happened to Ken Miles in real life. He got robbed of the Triple Crown. He's inducted into the Hall of Fame, being seen as one of the best drivers that ever lived. But it's very sad. But it was a wonderful arc, and it was just an exhilarating movie that left me just sitting there staring at the credits for 5 minutes, just thinking about the whole thing. So after thinking about it, I made this video so that I could get it all out, and I didn't have to think about it anymore. Now you can think about it. Those are my thoughts on Ford vs. Ferrari. I loved it. You should definitely check it out. But thanks for watching, guys. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, check out my other videos.